I'm having technology issues.
So you better do it better.
I hope so.
Like 2 hours.
Oh, really? What's after?
Yeah.
What's?
After all this, I need to 2 more hours.
Oh, sweet.
It's an advantage.
Oh, sweet. Well, I brought wines, flaming hoops, and, you know, so.
Mims, if you listen to management, people might have brought, but then
Actually, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that and just.
when the building burns down.
Right. It's actually a fake fire with the fans and the little leaf and the material that.
Lit from underneath, and then it's amazing from a distance how real that is.
Yeah, yeah. I was just watching a YouTube video of these Russians who have a lion, a pet lion, and it keeps attacking their teenage son, and they won't get rid of the lion.
So they're choosing the line
Over the son, yeah. So the kid is getting.
Tells you something as a son.
Yeah, well, you know, I was like, wow, you know, they have their priorities seem to be a little different than mine, but all right.
Just by the number.
Sweet.
That's one of my cereal cakes.
That's what I was wondering. That's something.
Yeah. We almost never eat swallow.
We're moving back here.
So much so that we could find nothing. Because the milk are always bad. So we just put on milk. Now I have cereal with milk. If ever we decided we wanted to do something with milk, but if
We should, soon.
I would cereal for all the time. My brain. High five. I wouldn't be a good technician. Technician, not really great. It's just keeping my labeling. Yeah, they got questions. Yeah, well, Dana's waiting this month for the battery. Yeah. It's interesting that I work in the same division. In the same. And what happens in that month, and it happens back in the month. We don't care, so if they just do info, yeah, okay, then he was done, I heard that he might come back. And for that, he gave a question about whether he comes back. Oh, is that the problem? Yeah, you can do 90 days, 10%. Carl Warren, retired, and he did play. Not right. Now we're back.
Yeah, I know, but so great. So I'd actually cleaned up some of my old covers.
Get like 90 days of work. It was too young. How old were you? I was 60. I don't know the whole story. I just know that they said you had to wait a month and then you come back. And I'll tell you, in my opinion, in that moment, I guess I'm suggesting I know it by saying that, but sometimes you kind I know they're trying to create a position. Yeah, we've started with that. Yep. Yeah, being involved in all the technology. On the bus, not on the rail and you know, so So you thought, you know,
So, it's like, it's totally.
you know, not having the expertise and then anyway, you really think about it. Lead up your radios.
Yeah,
and your own keys, too. And,
Yeah, we're not that far down.
and the only thing is you can sign and the things that we share across Monroe, we put all that together. We have 750. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, it's always about the handful.
And on the door, they haven't.
Yeah, because I get up at the same time.
Okay, I know we have a couple of people still coming. One is going to be late, but I did want to go ahead and get started and welcome. We are in the home stretch. This is our second to last class, and we have the pleasure of Koen, who is an energetic presenter, and he is a diversity trainer here in Minnesota. He provides face-to-face and online courses on diversity and education, including leadership development, empowerment training, cross-cultural competence, sensitivity training, racism training, and teamwork. He has a weekly blog that includes ideas for controlling, removing, and fighting discrimination. And so let's give a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Koen.
How many people have been in one of the sessions that I've done at our annual diversity conference? TTMS. Anyone been to any of those sessions that I've done? Okay, cool. All right, so no? Okay, cool. I just need to know which of my jokes I can repeat. So I appreciate that. I'm also humbled to be in the company of people who impact lives of people not only in the city, in the cities, but in the state. And so I'm really honored to be in front of you. Hopefully this will be engaging, that we're in a world that is it's very polarized, it seems. And so hopefully I'll give you some skills to kind of blend that polarization a little bit better, both in your professional and personal lives, as well as thinking and give you ways of thinking about how to engage folks that we may see as kids would say, as our ops, right? Kids refer to people who are not like them as their opposites or their ops. I guess they've moved on from cray-cray and I don't know if you, other slang terms. So there's that. But to start, let's do a quick activity. So in front of you are a set of nails. And many of you, this isn't a new opportunity. You may have seen this or participated in this before. But what I'd like for you to do is to take the nails that are on the table and balance all of those nails on the head of one. So take all of those nails that are on your table and balance them on the head of one. You'll also see that there's a block of wood. And if you find it necessary to use a block of wood, please do so. Right? So balance all of those nails on the head of one. So all of the nails on the head of one.
somebody else?
Sure. I'll give a chat an opportunity.
Just a couple more minutes. Five, four, three, two, one. All right. Cool. So what do you think about this process? What do you think about this idea of balancing those nails on the head of one? So when I asked you to do that, what are some of the things that came up for you?
Impossible.
That it's what?
Impossible.
That it's impossible. All right.
It's certainly difficult to find that balance.
It's certainly difficult to find that balance.
That's the trick.
What's the trick? Right?
You really think differently?
Are you asking if the trick is to think differently, or that is what's needed to come up with a solution? Yes. Cool. So first of all, you may not know me that well, but I don't get pleasure from other people's misery. So I certainly would not give you a task that was not possible. I wouldn't give you a task that wasn't possible because I don't enjoy other people's misery. So why do you think I would particularly start this session off with an exercise like this? Why do you think I would start? I haven't even totally introduced myself or got things from you, but why would I need to start with something like this?
Maybe it forces us out of our comfort zones a little bit.
To force us out of our comfort zones a little bit.
To demonstrate that there's solutions to things that seem like they're
That there are solutions that we may not even see, right? And it may even appear like there aren't solutions, but we know that there are solutions, right? I'll let you off the hook. One of the reasons I like to start with this is because it gets people to do something that the world outside of these four walls oftentimes does not encourage us to do. And what do you think that thing is? Think, right? Think. And it's funny, when I taught high school, I taught at a charter school in St. Paul, and it was very disheartening because we were teaching our students to think, right? We were cultivating their knowledge, we were empowering them, and then when they went to their job at Target, they did not want them to think. Just do number 47. Do number 48, right? So the world outside of us oftentimes does not encourage us to think. And so stretching that muscle is an important thing to realize. And so the trick isn't that you do or don't know how to do that, but do you even know how to approach it? Right? So I saw people trying different things, right? I saw people looking at other people who were trying things, right? And trying the things that they were trying. Most often we try to talk about that as either failure or copycatting. Anyone ever heard of copycatting, right? And how is that looked on in the majority of American culture? To copycat someone. How do we look at that? It's like some kind of weakness, right? That you can't do it yourself, so you have to rely on someone else. When in fact, that's the only way that we learn how to do things, is through relationships and mimicking other folks. So there's that. So I'll give you the solution to that. I will give you the solution to that, so you don't have to fret or worry about that. But before I get to that, I'm really curious. You've had a number of sessions before mine, and what were some of those sessions? Okay, yours is through the mentoring program. So what were some of the sessions that led up to this particular session? Because this is the second to the last one. I think your last one is a capstone, which will be a teach back, right? If I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That's news to them.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, or the genie out of the bottle. So what sessions did you have before this one? So change management. And what methods did they use when they talked about change management? Did they use a particular philosophy? Okay.
The phases of change.
Okay, the phases of change. All right. Did they do any Lewin work? Does that name sound familiar? Okay, cool. Just trying to see where you are. All right, so you did some change management stuff. What else? Creative problem solving. And what was the tenor of that particular training? Creative problem solving.
Thinking outside the box, trying to think in different ways.
Okay, thinking outside the box, trying to think in different ways. All right. What was it? There were 2 other sessions. Is that correct? What was the session before?
Going back, probably 3 months.
Yeah, going back. What's that? The 5 dysfunctions of a team. Leone's work, right? So I have, interestingly enough, I have a little bit of that in here as well as transformational leadership. All right, cool. Did anyone talk about servant leadership at all? That concept of servant leadership? You did? Okay, cool. So those are things that we'll find here. As we're talking about this idea of cultural competence, kind of 2.0 or the next depth or level or phase, however you want to put that, what are you hoping that we will talk about? So when you thought about this session, what were you hoping this session would deal with, talk about, lead you to, you come out of? What were your hopes for this session? And I'm going to write some of those things down so I can. Yeah. No, I think that's interesting because the pink tax, I would also say is a rainbow tax, and one argument, if I can just kind of give you something to kind of think about is no one pays 23% interest on a car unless they have to. Right? It doesn't make sense to do it unless you have to. So then, what are the contributing factors to that, right? So the idea of a pink tax is not just limited to pinkness. And what I would also suggest is that, and we'll talk about it here. We'll talk about it in this as we talk about the context, because context is important. That many of those people who are lashing out at not understanding that also may be impacted economically in ways that they don't see are connected, but in fact are connected. Right? Because I'm sure that those men are connected to women in some way, sisters, mothers, aunts, and so economically, it's impacting them as well. Right? So, we'll hopefully, Kelly, we'll get some more stuff. that you can use that are principles to kind of support people into thinking. The other thing that I think we also need to, and you brought that, this is a really good point, and we'll again talk about this, is what is a power struggle? What's a power struggle? Anybody have teams? Anyone been around teams? Okay. So nobody wants to compromise, two opposing ideas. Power struggle. You're going to say you're about to breathe.
Well, and they both think they're right. I mean, they both think they're right, so they can't agree to disagree. So just still.
Yeah. So when I was a teacher, again, working with students, they would try to engage me in power struggles. Do this. No, I'm not going to do that. Put your feet down. No, I'm not going to. No. And when I was a bad teacher, I would engage in those power struggles. So we would be vying for power until I realized something. In that particular context, I have all the power. I can get a student kicked out, I can give them detention, I can, blah, 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 or I can draw them into the class, make them participate. So I have the power to influence all the stuff. So if I'm struggling with power, then it's actually my problem because I don't recognize what power I have. Right? So when we talk about this idea of that we're debating things, that there is either a right or wrong, I want us to question our own thinking about that, right? So I am, you don't need to know this, but I don't mind sharing it. I am 47 years old, and I know I'm right. I know that I'm right. I have universities that have backed me up and said, he knows this information, he's right. I have thousands of hours of doing this work and research, and I know that I'm right. However, at this stage in my life, I don't need to be right. I'm looking to be effective. So what that might mean is, in some cases, I might look wrong. It may seem like someone is embarrassing me or is using me or being a doormat. Anyone ever heard that expression? And people are, don't be a doormat. Well, that's interesting because how many of you have doormats? And why do we have doormats? So that once they cross over that doormat, the dirt is left at the threshold and not brought to the next level, right? And so when we talk about, sometimes we don't want to be used to help someone get along to the next level. And so this idea that we can't be doormats. Now, I'm not saying that we take abuse, that we subject ourselves to things that are inhuman or anything like that. But ask yourself, what's the difference between being right and being effective? And how do we create that effectiveness? And I think when we debate things, we oftentimes aren't in that space to be effective. Right? What were some other things that people were hoping we would talk about in this session?
A lot of you talked about that being getting somebody to the next level. I mean, that, so being able to just, not let it bother you, the differences in opinion or whatever, and not care to think, I'm like talking about 11-year-old just now emerging with his own independence. We do have those power struggles. So what's the?
Yeah.
So okay, I know I'm right, but I still need you to do something.
Yep.
I still need you to turn off the Xbox or whatever.
Yep.
And so I'm hoping you will get this.
Yep.
Awesome.
Oh, no, do you? I was going to ask you, what is that book? Do you mind sharing? Because I got a 7.
Have a new kid by Friday.
Have a new kid by Friday. New kid by Friday. So, so Sue, I'll try to help you with that because that's one of the fundamental frameworks of what we're doing, right? So if I can't share with you how to be effective in being effective, then I'm just soaking up your time. Right?
Well, and that's just one example. I mean, there's obviously other examples in life where we just need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Successfully do that. Because I'm happy to just not argue the whole night.
Yeah.
It's not going to get me anywhere.
No.
But I still need to know how to do it.
Yeah, and so if we can shortcut some of the stuff, because some of the things that we get caught up in are the antics of people's behavior, right? So even in supervising folks, I have found, so I was the affirmative action officer for Anoka County, and I could tell you when I would start getting, I could put it on the calendar, when the rush of discrimination complaints or lack of accommodation complaints would start rolling in. And when do you think that was? Right before review time. Right? Why? Because people were being discriminated against? Possibly. People weren't getting access to their stuff? Possibly. But I also had folks who knew what? That they weren't performing. And so what did they want to do? Do a preemptive strike, right? So let me file this thing, blah, 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 blah. So I had to kind of whittle through those things. And of course, those things were happening. But I also had to recognize the cycle of some of those things, right? Other things folks were hoping we would talk about or deal with. Yes,
I
Chad?
was just looking maybe for a different point of view on, because I saw the diverse workforce heading on the class, and somebody else's point of view on that, besides mine,
Okay.
on all the different things that are happening nowadays. And,
Okay, cool. So I don't know what your view is, so we may actually have the same view, but if we don't, or if you're not getting what you want, poke me and then we'll see if we can get something else, right? So cool, yeah, so we'll look at this idea of the diverse workforce. What is that and why is that important?
Right, and all the rules around it, and is it all needed, or are we going overboard in some places, and
Yeah.
maybe it is all needed?
Yeah. So this is what I was saying. I mean, and I'll address part of that right now, right? So I believe that communism is a good system. I believe that socialism is a good system. I believe that free market capitalism is a good system. I also know that the problems with the systems only come when you add people. So on paper, all that stuff just works great. But you add people and it mixes and mucks everything up, right? So we'll kind of talk about how is some of the systems that we've been wrestling with, how are they being mucked up by people, right? And so how do we deal with those people in whatever systems we're in? Cool. Other folks, other things you are hoping we might talk about.
How can we get a diverse workforce, get people to work together as a unit, as a group?
Yeah. Cool. So how do you use that to your advantage? How do you get people to work together as a group? Cool. Anything else? And as things pop up, please say, Andre, can you say more about this? Or I was thinking about this. Can we? All right, cool. So these are goals and stuff. Oh, by the way, on your so if you have your smartphone, please keep it out because you may need to use it or you may want to use it. At the top of the presentation, you'll see that there is a URL. If you type that URL, you can ask questions, and I'll see them on the monitor. And if you want the presentation now, if you scan that Scan Me, you can have a copy of the presentation right on your phone. So there is that. So then there's the objectives and goals and all that kind of stuff, and I'll let you read that kind of stuff on your own. But this is something that if you could write this down, I think this is important. Context is everything. Context is everything. So I walk in. Yes. Oh, it's on the presentation. It's up here. Yep. So I can bring it up. I'll bring it back to it, and it's periodically through the presentation, so you can just scan it. So I walk into this room with privilege and power. I walk into this room with privilege and power. I am I'm 6'2". I'm African American. I'm a male. I am either lower middle class or upper lower class. I'm a cisgendered male, which means that my biological my biological gender and how I demonstrate that gender are the same. So I'm a cisgendered male. I am heterosexual. I'm male. I am married. I'm a father. I'm a conservative Christian. I don't have a felony. I'm mildly attractive and extremely humble. So all of those things provide me with privilege and power. Now, some of those things, like my degrees, I've earned those things. But there are other things that I haven't earned. And so they give me privilege and power in particular contexts. And so as context change, so does the privilege and power that I have associated with that, right? So in your handout, what I'd like for you to do is to just write down what are some of your privileges and some of your power. Where do your privilege and where does your power come from, right? So right on the privilege and power page in your handout. So what are some of your privileges or power? All right, stop right there. I want you to think about contexts. Are there contexts? Is there a context where your privilege or your power could be a liability? So just write down, somewhere liability, right? And where could that privilege or power be a liability? Just write that context. All right, and then also write context hyphen asset. Where are your power and privilege an asset? In what context is that an asset? Cool. What I'd like for you to do is to just take, we'll do about 4 minutes right at your table. Feel free to share your privilege and your power, share where those might be assets, and share where they might be liabilities. With 4 minutes to do that. You don't have to share what you don't want to share. So share what you would like to share. All right. Sweet. Just 1 minute. Four, three, two, one. And so, what? I know I did not give you a long time to have deep discussions, but what did you start to recognize about yourself as you went through talking about your power and privilege, and also talking about context where that could be a liability or an asset? What came up for you as you? Yes.
When we also have in common, we were born into what we were. Middle class, I was probably lower middle class, but I was at a little bit, I was at a meal, I never wanted something. Versus being born in a different country where you're born like yourself, all over the world, horrible position. You start out with so much against you, and we didn't choose where we were at. But that was a privilege as well as power, because you don't control it, but it literally falls in your lap. There's parts of it that can't necessarily do anything wrong.
Right. 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 So where you were born is both privilege and power, oftentimes. Right. I thank God that I was born in the United States. If I was born someplace else, I thank God for that too. Right. So the opportunity to be born is extremely impactful. Simultaneously, I think context is extremely important. Right. So what context were you born into? Other things that people noticed about themselves. Yes.
I never thought about my power method as a device quite so much. I kind of avoid where it actually positions me as opposed to the other, and I think that's definitely an American culture.
Yeah.
Our job is to position ourselves oppositely rather than worrying about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What might be the dangers in just looking at my positiveness?
Like that.
Huge blind spots, right? So huge blind spots. Why can blind spots be problematic? So you don't know what you don't know, right? And why is that problematic?
You can behave in ways that are either detrimental to others or inadvertently detrimental to yourself.
Yeah, right? So you can behave, act, think, and operate in ways that are detrimental to you as well as those people around you. I mean, just think about the blind spots in the car, if we use that as the metaphor, right? The blind spots can definitely impact you, but you can certainly impact lots of other people. Towards the end of my grandmother's driving career, she was so afraid that she stopped looking when she would change lanes, right? Her fear, right? And she's operating. So she's causing chaos and mayhem. Now, my grandmother was a gentle, kind woman, never really would have wanted to cause that mayhem, but her fear drove her literally to creating chaos wherever she went because she didn't want to see her blind spots. So the fear of recognizing that you can't see your blind spots drove her to behave in ways that are unlike her. Right? Unlike her. So cool. Yeah, and I really want us to recognize our power and privilege because if we don't, it becomes a weapon that we use against other people. Well, why didn't you do what I did? Well, I didn't come from the same context. I wasn't born with the same level of power or influence that you were. And so it takes me a little bit longer to do some things. It was funny, I was in an interview, and it was my interview for graduate school. And so they were asking me, when we look at your timeline of your jobs and all there's a lot of stuff that overlaps. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that overlaps. And they were like, well, that's kind of out of the box. I said, yeah, that's kind of out of the box. I said, because when you're used to living outside of the box, everything you do is outside of the box, right? It's non-traditional. And so a lot of times, even when we talk in our organizations, we're looking for people who have fit in a box that may not necessarily been the box that they've had access to, right? And right now, I'm trying to help people think about interviewing differently, right? So why, even asking the question, why are we interviewing people for jobs? Why do we interview people for jobs? Well, we say that it does this, that, and the other thing, but I don't know that. I know that there are actors. Tom, what's his name? The short guy, Tom Cruise, right? So I know that Tom Cruise is a great actor, and I appreciate that he's now doing more of his own stunts, but he is not a spy. So he has learned how to act like a spy in Mission Impossible, right? I wonder if people have learned how to act like an interviewer or an interviewee, but then when they show up on the job, we go, that's not what you did in the interview. Why? Because interviewing is a skill. So sometimes there's not a direct correlation between interviewing and having the right candidate. So why do we interview? And that's just something I'm trying to figure out myself and help organizations to think about. And so in that interviewing process, what kinds of things are you trying to get out of that versus asking these questions? And these people, there are tons of websites that coach you on how to say the right things in those interviews, but sometimes we see people show up differently in the job. But I'm sure not here, not at the council, right? So there's that. So we all have privilege and power, and it's not. One thing I want us to be mindful of is, and I'm not sure if it's a pride or if it's a caring about it, but I want us to recognize that privilege and power because those are tools that we can use. And we can use them for evil or we can use them for good, right? So your privilege and power is a tool. Yes?
Yes, with that, my question would be, is do this when you were privileged power, if you against you or someone else? Because I've had that clear why I can become point as well. And where people would assume certain privilege and power and working there is very diverse businesses and that. And people would come in and use what they perceive to be my social class, all those things against me with a deep. I haven't tried to contend with it. So how do you balance that of you becoming similar to things? How you handle when someone else tries to use it against you, basically, assuming that you're going to use it in a way that is negative and harmful to them. But when you really haven't done anything with it, and you're cognizant of what you have, so you're intentional. Not how do you think there's a balance of these where so you don't use it in a negative way, but how do you combat when someone else tries to use your own stuff?
Yeah.
In that.
Yep. I think the first way that we do that is by building relationships with folks, right? So, I'm sure there's some folks who've served in the military here. I would imagine